Hey, welcome into Juck on Bucks on a Friday. Appreciate you so much for joining me. And a busy Friday it is indeed, as we have got not one, not two, three announcements coming up today for recruits that the Buckeyes are in on after the big win of Aaron Thomas on Wednesday night. And don't let anybody downplay that to you because it was a 3-star. Not all 3 stars are created equal. Some 3 stars are 3 stars because they have a 3-star ceiling. Some 3 stars are just babies in their development, and they have a huge ceiling. Aaron Thomas, a huge athletic man, he fits in that category, and that's the difference. And that one becoming extra important as Drew Evers, one of the Buckeyes' interior line targets, chose SMU over Ohio State on Thursday, the day after I was making fun of Oregon for losing a battle to BYU. So that's karma. I apologize, everybody. That one's on me. But this is a sign of the times in the world we live in when everybody is working under the same budget, and SMU prioritizes him as lineman number 1. That's the top of their board. And for Ohio State, he's clearly not. So that's just something we're going to have to look forward to if everybody is actually following these rules until Ohio State figures out a way to incorporate these deals as open-ended deals and or promises and or has a opportunity to show, okay, we got 3 years of data here on the guys that have come in as freshmen in this new system. Here's what they're making now. Eventually, water finds its level, and Ohio State being at the top of this game is the level. So it'll happen, but it might be rocky for the first couple of years, and that's okay when we're looking at this class right now. That's still, despite the rockiness, looking fantastic, not been perfect. We've missed out on plenty of battles we thought we otherwise would have won if things weren't, if some things were different on the money end of things. But, sometimes you got to get through some bumpy avenues and you'll come out in the end looking great if you do things the right way and you have the right people in place. And I think everybody agrees the right people are in place running Ohio State football. They've shown that to us. They've shown the willingness to adapt, maybe not always as fast as some would like, but they've never gotten themselves in trouble. Of course, nobody else has really gotten themselves in trouble going about it the wrong way yet, but maybe this time they will. But over the next 2 days, Friday and Saturday, we've got announcements coming from defensive line target Damari Simeon. Today, we've got Jerquaden Guilford, the number 1 player out of Indiana, one of Heartline targets, wide receiver. 5:30 tonight, he is going to make his announcement. So we are going to go live at 5 p.m. tonight here at Juck on Bucks. And that one will be carried on 247. So whenever they stream it, I like to go live so we can pull the stream in. As for those other guys, not sure. Like Damari Simeon's a really shy guy. I imagine that decision will just be a Twitter announcement. Jackson Ford, not sure yet. Got a message to him, but I haven't heard. A bunch of crystal balls have just come in for him to Penn State over the last few days. And generally that means some news might have broke. As for Damari Simeon, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, and there's now some Texas folks who are feeling very confident. I'm not so sure. I've got a feeling Damari Simeon going to be a Buckeye. Jackson Ford going to be at Penn State. Cam Brickle announces on Saturday. We've seen crystal balls come in for him to the Buckeyes. We'll get on more of that later. But there has been a picture released from a hibachi grill, and this is a picture of all of the Ohio State defensive line crew. I think there's some interesting observations to take away from this picture. I'm going to pull it up. I want to give my thoughts and let you guys take a look at that. We've also got Ryan Day with a couple of quotes, as well as Urban Meyer, who is becoming a quote machine lately. Maybe some of your comments at the end. And also I've been compared to Jeffrey Dahmer by one of you, which I did not appreciate whatsoever. Additionally, for our friends in podcast format, people tell me I do a podcast. I don't do a podcast. I do a show, which I release in audio format. That's podcast format. But those of you who reached out who only listen in podcast format told me that Thursday's episode was digitally messed up. So I took it down. I apologize. Apparently 4 minutes of silence and then skipping. Total disaster. I'm going to make it up to you guys with a podcast version of the show sometime soon that will only be available in audio format. And I'm kind of excited for it. I'm going to lean back in my chair. Like, it certainly has its advantages if there's no camera rolling. But I can tell you right now, if this wasn't a YouTube show, never would have reached even the minimal level of success that it has now, because it is so much more difficult to grow in that audio only format. I don't know why. but it'll sit stagnant for several months at a time. It's just interesting. But I'm going to hook you guys up. So I want to get in today to Ryan Day talking to Letterman Row, and Letterman Row got an exclusive interview with him, and they are releasing like one topic of that interview a day. But the first one was Ryan Day talking about Big Noon Kickoff, which I found interesting because he has not spoken about this before. He's been very diplomatic, not said anything bad, not really given his opinion at all. Just basically, we're going to play when they want us to play. And he went a little bit in on this after we know that Ross Bjork went in on it in his presser talking about the new settlement. So Day says, quote, I think a noon game is fine. I think it's a great window. It's a good window for Fox. They're a great partner of the Big Ten, but having some flexibility certainly is good for us, healthy for the program. As you know, that night game against Tennessee, just the electricity of a night game, very easy to recognize. And I think having some different times of games is a good thing. So that Tennessee game was, like, to me, honestly, I think the best night game I've ever been to as far as atmosphere. It was just insane. Now, I've not been to an LSU night game, and there's a couple of places that I would like to go and experience a night game there. But with the stakes, with the energy from the Ohio State fans, that 3 weird weeks leading up to it, the new red lights, like everything was just there, all the Tennessee fans, and it was kind of like a challenge. Everything was perfect for an amazing atmosphere, and it was crazy. Not just the fact that it was a night game, but all those things rolled into one. But that Tennessee game was the first ranked opponent at the Horseshoe since 2022 against Notre Dame. And we remember how wild that game was. Tons of celebrities everywhere. Not that that makes for, any different of an atmosphere, but it was a huge deal. Obviously a huge night, and the weather was warm enough to get a lot of people out. Pretty cold at the Tennessee game. But Ohio State fans have been pushing back against this big noon stuff for several years now, very irritated by the lack of night games. And I really can't stand it when someone is voicing their opinion, and a valid opinion, in this case, displeasure against the lack of night games. And the everything is perfect brigade, who takes any comment that isn't a cheerleader comment about Ohio State as an attack on Ohio State football. And they take things out of context, and they say things like, go root for another team. And they say things like, no, it obviously doesn't affect recruiting. Well, Ryan Day disagrees with the everything is always perfect brigade on this. And obviously it does affect recruiting. You have got guys who are playing on Friday night, and Ohio State increasingly recruits more and more kids from out of state, much to my chagrin. But you've got all these guys who are playing on Friday night from out of state. And your option, if you're Ohio State, is to get them in at a 12 o'clock game to see a big time opponent, or have them for a night game, which is obviously much easier for them. Well, your big games are at noon. Your night games are against the MAC. What do? If you bring them in for a big game, you get a comment like I heard from a 17-year-old linebacker out of North Carolina in an interview talking about his trip to Ohio State, literally said, I was nodding out in the stands. I was just so tired. Okay, that's great, man. That's great for recruiting. Or you bring them in for the game against Ohio or Western Michigan at night, and then the following week they go down to an Alabama and Georgia game at night, and what's their takeaway? They're 17. They don't understand that the shoe gets way better for a top-notch opponent than it does for Ohio. Their first thought is, wow, the SEC really is that much better. They really do care that much more. You're in a lose-lose situation either way you go. Now, we heard Ross Bjork voice his displeasure at the presser and wanting flexibility. Ryan Day on the recruiting, he says it helps recruiting to be able to get people to come in after their Friday games, catch a flight so they can get here for a late afternoon or night game. That matters. I think it matters for the atmosphere. Not that a noon game is a bad atmosphere, just something about a night game that is very special. Our partnership with Fox has been great. I'll kind of let Ross fight that battle for us. We'll kind of see where it goes, he said. But there is no question or denying the fact that there is a lot of value in playing night games. Now, to that fact, I think that what Ross Bjork has done here is set this up. Obviously, we didn't get the Texas game at night. He tried his best. But we got the comment from Fox saying that, Ohio State's a great partner. They wanted to try to accommodate a great partner. And he set it up to now go and ask next season that the Buckeyes can get one of these big games that are at home at night. And what are those big games? Let's look at the schedule. All right, so let's start off by saying the schedule is amazing in 2026 as the Buckeyes get to play 4 of the other 7 blue bloods in college football in Nebraska, USC, Michigan, and Texas. That is amazing. To be able to knock all 4 of them off is a true privilege in one season. And who knows, maybe you see another one in the playoffs. That would be so cool. But 4 of the 8 blue bloods. In addition to that, you've also got Illinois on the up and up, Indiana on the up and up, Iowa. Who else? Oh, and Oregon. Just Oregon. So the schedule is lit. You've got 8 huge games. And then talking about the home slate, you've obviously got the huge one against Michigan, the huge one against Oregon, and the third biggest game you've got at Ohio Stadium, assuming Illinois continues at the trajectory they're at, is Illinois. So the Buckeyes, obviously, the Michigan game is going to be a Fox big noon game. There's no doubt about that. That's their number 1 draft pick every year. So the question now becomes, can Ross Bjork get them to bend or be flexible with him on the game time with the Oregon game? If not, I say he gets the Illinois game for sure, which at least gives us one decently competitive game at night. And the way he set this up now is they want to be, working with Ohio State as a happy partner. They know Ohio State's carried the deal. The fact that Ross said that publicly, I think it means something. And they don't want to go back to the negotiation table with the Big Ten, with the most powerful force in the Big Ten, Ohio State, irritated and wanting to put in a bunch of stipulations into that next contract. For instance, the CBS deal that they had with the SEC for years at the 3:30 time slot had something in there that you could only feature one program 3 times in one calendar year on that SEC game of the week, which means when Bama was rolling and they were the best in the SEC, they could only put them on 3 times. They couldn't just cherry pick every Alabama game for ratings. And I would love it if that was in the Big Ten schedule, whether it in the contract with the Big Ten and Fox. But if it's not, at least to know that they are going to be working with Ohio State would be a great thing. And I think Ross Bjork just operates in a way that is Ohio State first. Hopefully that aligns with the Big Ten, but the platform here is Ohio State first. I don't feel it was like that always with Gene Smith. So in that instance, I love it with Ross Bjork. Let's get to the Triple Option podcast, which seems to consistently get us really good quotes from Urban Meyer. And we've got another one from him. But first, let's get to Bret Bielema, who is just kind of becoming a hero. The way he's speaking out and saying things other coaches will not. And I've said this for years when it comes to these coaches will talk about tampering, okay? And they get so irritated about tampering, they'll come on in a press conference and wave their finger about tampering just to talk tough, and they will not call out the program that they're angry at. They won't point the finger. They just generically talk about other programs tampering, and they speak about specific instances. Well, I got a guy and he got this and that. I won't say who. Man, throw him out there. Like, coaching is a very small fraternity, and these guys are very mobile in their careers, switching jobs all the time, getting fired, resigning, moving up, moving down. The last thing they want is a bad reputation. And if these guys started getting the stones to call out the peers that were violating the rules and screwing over other peers, I think it would be the first big step to get them to think twice before they go and tamper like this. And for the first time, we're starting to, well, we saw our hero down at Miami of Ohio do it last year. So Miami of Ohio lost their kicker, Graham. Remember Graham? We were all upset that Graham didn't come to Ohio State. Alabama poached Graham, got him in the transfer portal. And that Miami of Ohio coach came out and called out Alabama publicly, which I loved. Well, now Burt Bielema chiming in, becoming one of the first kind of high-profile head coaches to really call somebody out. And I love it. So Josh McCray was Illinois' running back last year. And Burt said, we did lose a guy to Georgia. Somehow he found his way into the portal. And 12 hours after being in the portal, he was on a flight to Georgia. I don't know how that happened, but it's kind of crazy. We wish Josh the best. He took advantage of that opportunity. So being brutally honest, man, this is what everybody wants to hear. They want to hear coaches calling people out. And nobody gets in trouble for this as of yet. We'll see what happens moving forward under the CDC. And I want Ohio State to go out and make things happen at times in the portal. For instance, in the spring portal, we were sitting there waiting to see what defensive tackles were going to enter the portal. And when you look at programs like Georgia, what did they do? They needed a running back. They went and got Josh McCray to enter in the portal. I wanted to see Ohio State do that. And at the same time, I get irritated when other programs do this and when we hear stories about Josh McCray. But the fact is, they don't get in any trouble for it. Nobody calls them out. And we know Ohio State certainly has the power to go pull somebody or entice them into the portal by just saying to these agents, look, here's my criteria, what I'm looking for. Go. Do any of you represent a guy like this? Let's talk if you do. But the Buckeyes wouldn't do it. In a way, I commend them for being one of the few who operate on a high standing because they don't want to cheat. But honestly, everybody else does. And I'm hoping that the CDC can help clean this up. So Georgia, who runs their program an awful lot like Ohio State in all things recruiting and talent acquisition, I was kind of surprised to hear that Kirby did this. But the Buckeyes certainly don't operate like that. But kudos to Brett Bielema for calling them out on it. I love it. I wish it got more publicity than it did. This was a couple days ago. I haven't really heard it many places. But let's talk about Urban. Urban said something last week regarding one of my least favorite topics because it just goes around and around in circles, and it has forever, and I'm ready to come just for this thing to come to a conclusion, and that is the Stallions-Michigan situation. And it looks like we're going to get our wish. It's coming pretty soon. But whatever happens, whatever the outcome is, I don't have a prediction here. My prediction is the same as it's always been, and that is the NCAA is incredibly inconsistent, and I don't have any idea what they're going to do. I would love to see vacated wins. That would make me really happy. Is that going to hurt the program moving forward? No. But I want to be able to, look at the records and have them be very pissed off that that season is not acknowledged, or several seasons are not acknowledged, because the people who looked at all the evidence looked at it and said, this was bad enough that we are not even giving you credit for these wins. That would make me feel good. Now, sure, we all saw it happen, but yeah, it happened. If it happened and the people who saw the evidence said it happened unfairly, well, hey, that's good enough for me. Now, if I'm a Michigan fan, I'm going to say I don't care about that. I am going to care about that. I'm going to say I don't care. Does it affect us going forward? Because I'm always looking forward. That doesn't affect them going forward. What affects them going forward? A postseason ban, right? A postseason ban would certainly affect them going forward. But if it's a 1-year postseason ban, I almost feel like this is not a bad thing for that Michigan crew. When we look at it with a young head coach, a great 2025 recruiting class who are coming in as freshmen this year, if we got a postseason ban, we know we can't make it to the postseason, then what are we going to do? We're not caring about wins and losses as much, so we're going to play a lot more of those young guys than we otherwise would have. And that seems like somewhat of an advantage to me, to sacrifice a couple of wins to play all those young guys and get ready for 2026. With year 2, Bryce Underwood, and year 2, all those talented freshmen this year. If it's a multi-year postseason ban, well, that would be something, because they obviously had a really good 2025 recruiting class, and in 2026, they just now got the ball rolling. They've been really hot this past week. We'll go over that a little bit at the end of the show when we hit on some of the bigger stories in recruiting around the country. But if it's a multi-year postseason ban, do we now see a difference in that? Do we see guys decommitting? Do we see dudes who don't want to sign up for that? Like, I think that has some effect. A lot of you guys have put in the comments, how are they continuing to recruit well with all this hanging over their head? I mean, I think they're doing a great job at selling that nothing's going to happen to a lot of these families. I'm sure there are plenty of guys who don't want to go and mess with it. I'm sure there are. We just don't hear about them. They never make it that far in the process before they say, I'm not really trying to get into that. But they're finding the guys that don't care, and they're also able to deal with danger pay here, right? You work a very dangerous job, you get a big pay bump for working that dangerous job because of the risk. Money cures all ills in recruiting, and it certainly seems like that's the way this has gone. And now they've got Larry Ellison helping them foot the bill. So What's irritated me most about the entire Stallions thing is when I see educated football people who have played the game say that there is no advantage. There is no advantage in knowing the other team's signals, even simple things like, are they going to run? Are they going to pass? It blows my mind, and we've seen plenty of them say it. Obviously, there are some who say that's ridiculous. But if there was no advantage, now we're all very privy to what this operation is, not just the Stallions operation, but it kind of opened the door into how much time and effort all these teams put into trying to get these signals. If it wasn't a help, why would they all go through these painstaking measures to not only try to get them, but to try to disguise them with 4 guys signaling in, with play sheets over the mouth, right? Like all these different ways to try to make sure they don't get the signals. And they're doing that because there's no advantage. Of course there's an advantage. What a moronic statement. The second thing is, what Stallions didn't have much of an extra advantage. Okay, if it didn't have much of an extra advantage, why in the world would he do what he did? Painstakingly, tickets all over the country to go get this. Like if it was an advantage, why would someone go through all of that? It seems pretty obvious that it was a decent enough advantage to make it worth all of that time. But Urban spoke out on it, and Urban said everybody needs to understand that when you say signals, there are a couple of signals that there are only a couple of signals you can get fast in real time. Is it run? Is it pass? Is that significant? Hell yeah, it is. It's a tremendous advantage. It changes the entire technique of the defensive front, the linebackers. And second, everybody knows it's a pass. That's a completely different story. And then the whole right or left, if you know it's a run to the right or a run to the left. And that's why I understand what the advantages are. Whether other coaches have done that before in the past, I've never heard of this before. A lot of this is to be determined on its surface, but it's a competitive advantage. A lot of this is to be determined on the surface, but is it a competitive advantage to know the signals of your opponents illegally? You got them illegally? Of course it is. Again, I can't stress this enough, how absurd it is for anybody to say that it isn't. But to Urban's point, and this is the point a lot of people have made, and I'll be honest, it's one that I also understand as well and have thought from the beginning. Like there is only so much information. Let's say, for instance, in real time, Ohio State signals in. Michigan reads the signal. The first thing they got to do is the signal guy needs to relay that information to the defensive coordinator. Now the defensive coordinator needs to quickly think, okay, how am I going to counter this? Now I've got to relay that signal into my guys. All of this is happening while Ohio State's about to run their play. So how much information can you really get to them? Basic stuff, just basic stuff, like what Urban's talking about. Is it a run? Is it a pass? Is it going to the right or the left? Things like this, very basic stuff, but drastically different of how you're now going to play now if you're the player on the field. And you can do this all legally. If you can do it good, it's certainly an advantage. That's why people try to do it. That's why people try to cover for it. And apparently doing it illegally is an advantage, or else you don't go through this huge operation to try to get it illegally. All that's pretty clear. The question is, does the lack of compliance, does the situation with Jim Harbaugh and everything that they've done to irritate the NCAA so much make them so irritated that they pound them especially hard? I don't know, man. We're going to find out soon. I cannot wait for it to be over, but we're hearing some confidence on the Michigan side of things that they think it'll be light. To be honest, I don't even know what the category is that they consider a light punishment, or that people who want to see a hammer dropped consider what will make them happy. I don't think anybody's ever established the parameters here. What constitutes a hammer? What constitutes a light punishment? I don't know. I know I'll be happy with vacated wins. I'll be super happy with a multi-year postseason ban as well. What happens, I don't know. All right, let's get to the stadium, because I saw a little tidbit the other day I want to hit on. So we have discussed for a while here on the show about how Ross Bjork has made it a priority to upgrade Ohio Stadium, and not just upgrade it, but fix a lot of it, including the infrastructure. And he's kind of made it his thing. And he has started off with 3 projects that he's announced. The 1922 Club, which is a club inside the stadium, unlimited food and beverage, temperature controlled, that people can pay a rate to be a member of, and they can go in during games 3 hours before, a couple hours after, eat and drink all they want. There is no view of the field in the bowels of the stadium, so it's not taking away anything from the seating. It's not taking away anything from anybody. Just a way to add extra revenue. Great idea. Nobody's hurt from it, and those who want to spend that extra money goes to the athletic department. We all win on that. Then he did the lights. You got the red LED lights, which debuted against Tennessee. They were awesome. They added a ton to the atmosphere. And then you've got the South End Zone project, which many were not happy about. You got the 9 luxury boxes field level. You got 400 seats that are wide instead of 18, 22 inches wide. Good for us larger fellas. And that's cool, but a bad view. At any rate, people were more upset that you moved the band to the other side and that the student section is moved back a little bit. Understandably so. And I think what more people were irritated about were you got 2 projects here that you've announced that are, kind of exclusively for rich folks. And it's more like, okay, what about the rest of us? And that was kind of more of the blowback than anything else. I feel like there was a couple of easy hitters that they could have announced that we know they're going to do eventually. And they could have just said, we're exploring the scoreboard, talking about redoing the bathrooms, the turf, which is obviously going to have to happen in 3 years anyway. But Bucknuts spoke to an anonymous former player, and he had this to say. I think there's a lack of urgency in upgrading the horseshoe. I feel that Ross Bjork knows that there are a lot of issues that he is spearheading and the process to enhance the stadium. I like where his head's at. But it sounds like his hands are tied right now to a certain degree financially because they are kicking all big projects down the road. Talking about the scoreboard, he says that's not coming until the fall of 26 at the earliest. It could be 2027 before we have it. Same deal with the electronic ribbons around the stadium. Also, they should have ripped up the outdated bathrooms right after the Tennessee game and began the process of remodeling them. They are an embarrassment, but new bathrooms are another stone we're kicking down the road instead of handling it right now. So bathrooms not planned, but it sounds like the video board is being discussed extensively. The video board in 26 or maybe 27, he sounds disappointed about that. I'm thrilled. Maybe he's not, doesn't understand how long these things take. Like those things are in plans. And then, to get the plans approved in an old stadium, to get it retrofit in there, then you got to make the thing, then you got to install the thing, and you got to do it all around the football schedule. Like getting that thing by 26 would have been stunning. Getting it by 27, I would be thrilled if we got that by 27. I don't think that's kicking the can down the road at all. Makes me kind of happy to hear that that's being discussed with that kind of time frame. Again, this is an anonymous source, so we're not sure how much to take from it. But if he's right about these conversations, I'm really happy about this. I think for most of us, and, I don't know about you guys, but there are a couple of things that need done. The stadium, the facilities. We'll talk about the facilities a little later. But things like infrastructure, like the bathrooms, I think are really important. You got 24 major restrooms in the stadium. So 24 big restrooms. Demolition, all the toilets, partitions, tile on the wall, the fixtures, the mirrors, like depending on the plumbing situation, you're probably looking at about $200,000 for each one of those restrooms to redo them. And if you can spread that out, between 3 years, it's not that much money. We're talking like $4 million total, spread that out. But the problem with the restrooms as well is there's not enough. You built the stadium in an era where people weren't drinking all day and they didn't need to pee as much. So that's the issue you got there. And there really is no area to put more restrooms. Ross is talking about the dumpsters, right? When the stadium was built, there was not a reason to have a ton of space for dumpsters outside of the public eye. And now we consume a ton of things during the game that they never anticipated back then. Tons of food, tons of trash, which means you need dumpsters and they sit in the concourse. What do you do about that? Well, he's talking about building a place for those dumpsters. So you have limitations. I don't know how they ever build more restrooms. I just don't know how that happens. But updating the ones you do have, pretty simple project. But When we talk about the $20 million in revenue sharing, there's a lot of people who are talking about, they can't afford to do any of this. They've got all these new expenses. And I always like to point out that they got a $50 million raise last year with the Big Ten deal with Fox, and that will come every year. So they're $30 million to the good, even with that new $20 million going out. So the athletic department that brings in the most money of any athletic department in the country, that revenue sharing percentage to Ohio State is smaller than it's a smaller hit than it would be for anybody else. So when we talk about facilities, there's the question of what do you want them to do first, the stadium or facilities? If you had your choice, if I had my choice, I would rather they did the facilities first. That's my opinion on it. We're only in the stadium a couple of hours a year. The players are in the facilities, every day, 10 hours a day. And when we look at teams on Ohio State's level, the Georgias and Texases and Bamas of the world, they've long since lapped Ohio State in that department. Auburn, Illinois, Northwestern, Cincinnati, those are now the schools that are lapping Ohio State, where at this point it's like, man, this sucks. And my buddy DG pointed this out, the Cincinnati facilities, a couple of weeks ago. And immediately he got a ton of hate. Some people took this as a shot at Ohio State football when it's actually just the opposite. It's a defense of Ohio State football. Ohio State football is the engine of the wealthiest athletic department in the country. I recently saw a survey. Most fans of Ohio State support the 34, 36 sports that Ohio State has, doesn't want to see them cut back, like 75%. Now, I'm on the other side of that. I'd like to see some of them go down to a club level. But even if you want them all kept, I don't think anyone agrees that it is fair or just that all those other sports, not all of them, but several of them have gotten brand new facilities and playing venues before the football program. That just doesn't make any sense at all when the money comes in from the football program. But here's what a parent had to say recently in a quote from Bucknuts. Ohio State is not up to speed in facilities. There are high schools in Texas that have better facilities than Ohio State. Facilities are obviously not everything, but I was very surprised that a program like Ohio State was behind the other big dogs. The thing for me is I don't like Ohio State to be second or third or fourth in anything. I don't like to see them 60th in anything at all. Like when we're talking about, the thing about this is, like, some will say, you look at Cincinnati's facilities, you look at Ohio State's facilities, nobody's ever choosing Ohio or Cincinnati over Ohio State. So what's it matter? The players are coming out, pumping out guys into the NFL. Obviously, everything's going fine in those facilities. And it's true. It's all true. But there are some things, it's just like a general principle. I don't want Ohio State to be 60th best in the country at anything. Third down percentage, facilities, anything. Ohio State is literally the premier college football program in the country. It's number one, and it should be number one in all areas, especially when the money is coming in from the football program. The football program should be taken care of first. Just my opinion on it. But if I had my choice, I would get the football players a big, beautiful new complex, 3 times the square footage, like Auburn in Nebraska, in Georgia, and a big, beautiful monument to the football program, because that's the home of the football program, the complex where the players and the coaches live, and the stadium. That's it. That's where all the trophies are kept. That's where everything is. That is Ohio State football central right there. And it should be absolutely as nice as Georgia's and Texas's and everybody else's, and certainly Cincinnati's and Illinois'. So, like to see where you weigh in. You got one choice: stadium, facilities. What say you if you are Ross Bjork? Where do you go first? All right. Now, we have talked a bit about Michigan. All right. So Michigan folks, very, very excited. They've been on a run recently in recruiting. We're talking several top-notch defensive line players. They've got maybe 2 now in the top 150. They are getting a couple of real wide receiver prospects. They got one last year in Andrew Marsh. They got Slim Homie here. Take a look at Slim Homie. I mean, get a look at this dude. This guy needs a cheeseburger, no doubt, but he is a long, decent wide receiver, top 100 type kid, and they're doing much better. It looks like we've got... All right, let's get into some recruiting as the arch enemy has had some movement this week, and they're getting really excited. As far as the defensive line, they grabbed Titan Davis, a top 100 kid out of Missouri, 6'4", 260, pairing him with Mikhail Blade, a top 150 kid, one of the better edge rushers in the country, 6'5", 255. And they also got Alistair Vallejo a couple of weeks ago, who's kind of like their new age Mason Graham, they're hoping. Just a big dude to plug in the middle. I really like the film of him and Blade more than Titan Davis myself. On the offensive line, they had Bear McWhorter, who they beat Georgia for, straight up for a kid out of Georgia. And they just got Marky Walbridge, who is a guy that the Buckeyes offered. There was never any real movement with him, and he was kind of always leaning Michigan from the very beginning. Then they grabbed Jonathan Brown. Now, I never like to crap on a Buckeye kid, right? But Jonathan Brown out of St. Francis de Sales, and he was unranked at the time when Michigan offered him, which was, kind of a silent offer. And then Tony Alford brought him in. And this is kind of like, okay, we're going to try to get a kid in case we don't get Savion Hyder. Had offers from Kent State, Eastern Kentucky, Air Force, and Navy when Michigan offered him and brought him in. And I wanted to watch his film and see what's up with them. What are they seeing in him? He kind of runs like he's got concrete shoes, but he's got some wiggle to him. Does not look to me to be a Michigan kind of caliber back. So a big whiff for Tony Alford, honestly, if they don't get Savion Hyder, but they are all the way in on this. Anyway, they've got another wide receiver, Zion Robinson, committed, who is a real wide receiver like Andrew Marsh last year, 6'2.5", 175, and a 4-star top 200 kid that needs a cheeseburger or two. Definitely going to need to get a couple of cheeseburgers when he gets on campus, and we know that they can provide him with a cheeseburger, but just a cheeseburger. But they are also in on another really big wide receiver prospect, as the Bryce Underwood effect certainly starting to help them with a selling point to wide receivers. So they're doing better, but all in all, I wouldn't be as excited as they are. Their per player ranking, their number of 3-stars in the class right now, it's 8 4-stars to 5 3-stars, an 88.44 overall player average. Ohio State at 91.52 with our 17-man class, 2 5-stars, 12 4-stars, 3 3-stars, but I expect that 3-star to shoot up here soon, as unfortunately, look, it's just kind of going to be the way it crumbles here, I think. But I believe Jameer Perez is already in the class. He just hasn't announced yet. He's a 3-star. I believe Cam Brickle is going to choose the Buckeyes on Saturday. He's a 3-star. So there's 2 3-stars right there that you're going to add to the defensive line, along with Aaron Thomas and Tucker Smith, 3-stars on the offensive line, and Corbin Fordham, a 3-star who technically plays on the line of scrimmage, tight end. And it's coming away looking like all the 3-stars are in the trenches, and you know that's going to really, really irritate people. And I get it. I do get it. But some of those are interesting cases. Like, number one, Aaron Thomas, different type of dude. That's a guy, a lot of people wanted. And that's a guy with a really high ceiling. The same thing can be said about Jameer Perez, who, honestly, we don't get dudes that size. Like, that's just different. Totally different. You got to take him. You certainly want him. And Cam Brickle, I don't think is a 3-star. Like, honestly, he's not someone I'm super excited about. But when we look at the twitchiness and the size, which he's not, people try to make him sound really big, like a 1-tech. This is a 6'2", 300-pound kid. That's not a big guy. He's really about Damari Simeon's size. If we're just talking about body fat percentage, if they're at the same body fat, he's the same size man as Damari Simeon, who is 6'2", 275. But Cam Brickle, kind of twitchy, kind of like K-Mac. And if you end up in this defensive line class on the interior with Damari Simeon, Cam Brickle, and JJ Perez, you have got a top 200 player and 2 3-stars. So 4-star Damari Simeon and 2 3-stars. Then on the edge, you got Kari Wilder, who's a top 255 guy, 4-star. And if you don't pair him up with Carter Meadows, depending on who you get in there, rankings-wise, you could be looking at one of the worst classes on the defensive line that you've seen in a long time. And compared to the rest of the top 5, it will be significantly behind the rest of the top 5. Significantly. And that is not going to bode well for the Fire Larry chorus. For those of you who get annoyed by hearing that, brace yourselves if that happens, because that one is coming, and it's coming in a big way. All right, my friends, let's get to a couple of your comments. We got a little bit of time here. Chris asks, Juck, how much does it help that Georgia got a running back recruit in terms of our chances on Derek Cooper? So, as we've talked about for a while here on the show, Georgia was after Jay Lamar, who I have over Derek Cooper, and so does Georgia. So I feel good about my evaluation on that. Georgia gets Jay Lamar, and Georgia was obviously in the final 3 for Derek Cooper. Derek Cooper had Georgia, who he had previously committed to and decommitted, but they were still in his final 3. Georgia, Miami, and Ohio State. Now Georgia gets Jay Lamar. They're still pursuing Derek Cooper, but there's not going to be a lot of money to give Derek Cooper. Miami and Ohio State are the 2 probably tops right now, so it probably moves Ohio State above Georgia for sure, because they'll have more to offer him, I would say. But Miami is offering the big money here for the Florida kid, the South Florida kid. He's down in Hollywood, Florida, which is 40 minutes outside of Miami. But there's been talk that his mom wants him to leave the area, go out of state. Not sure exactly why. I don't know. Maybe there's trouble around. Who knows? But ultimately, when we look at the deal that they're offering, I mean, we're talking close to $750,000. I don't know. I don't know how you see a kid with, they think differently of Miami down there than we do. So that's cool to go to Miami. And you got a kid down there, cool to go to Miami, much bigger payday. I think he ends up at Miami, but it does probably help our chances a little bit. That said, when we look at this class, I think one of the bigger mistakes that we will end up lamenting at the end of it was Carsyn Baker. Carsyn Baker was the running back that a lot of us expected a while back. You were going to end up with Carsyn Baker in favor of Key. And remember, all of a sudden, the Buckeyes were no longer recruiting Carsyn Baker and just going to take a swing at Savion Hyder and Derek Cooper and try to pair one of them with Favor Key, because at the time, they felt like they were going to get one. Not sure why they felt that way. It's looking now like maybe they were going to be wrong. I mean, very likely that they're going to be wrong. And you end up with just Favor Key. Well, the reason that Carsyn Baker was no longer being recruited is, it was an Ohio State decision. And it was an Ohio State decision, to my understanding, because he wanted to commit and they were like, hold off. That's a mistake now, right? We can look back and say, if you don't get Hyder and you don't get Cooper, that looks like a big mistake, because whether you think, I don't think the world of Carsyn Baker. He had some really good physical tools as far as a 6'2", 200 pounds and really, really fast. I don't feel like he's a very good natural running back, but boy, when he hits the edge, he's gone. So you had the opportunity to get him in favor of Key. You probably should have taken it, looking back, but you took a shot at the big guy. Now, that's interesting because we're in a similar situation on the defensive line. Cam Brickle announces Saturday. What if you get Damari Simeon and then Cam Brickle wants to commit and you say, hold off because you want Deuce Gerald's, and then you don't get Deuce Gerald's. Similar situation, right? But different position, different area of needs. I think you're going to get the green light for Cam Brickle. And if we get Damari Simeon, we could be done on the interior of this defensive line class by the end of this weekend with Damari Simeon, Cam Brickle, and Jameer Perez, who's not announced yet, but I firmly believe is in the class. Let's move on to our buddy Jay Nino. We are seriously only spending $14 million of the 20. That would be handicapping ourselves. So, number one, you've got Title 12, right? You can't just neglect the women's sports. But these are just estimates. These are just estimates. It's fair to say that almost most schools will be very similar with how they're going to distribute this, but Ross Bjork would not come out and give official numbers here, just kind of roughly what we're going to do. And that's kind of what it breaks down to. But I don't know that we're going to see other schools that are going to do it a whole lot different. Either way, nobody's going to say it or admit it, but that is certainly what it sounds like right now. And obviously, me, I care the most about football. I would like 19 to go to football, but there's legalities and things that I'm not concerned about because I don't have to be. Lance says, Juck, you got to take off those Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, bro. Lance, my gosh, man, let me tell you something. Lance, look at Lance. Lance got a nice bod, man. Lance, good looking physique. You know who's got a better physique? Mrs. Milletti. And Mrs. Milletti loves me in those glasses. So I'm going to stick with my Jeffrey Dahmer glasses. Dan says, you cannot say Juckeye balls are on Womack. Now, I don't know if you guys might have missed that. Chris wants to know about Womack. The Juckeye balls are on Womack. The Juckeye, I don't know what the predictive thing is. I can't call it the crystal ball. That's patented. The Juckeye balls coming out of my mouth didn't sound as good as it did in my head. We'll have to figure something else out. Look, I think Womack ends up a Buckeye. That's where I've always been with this guy. It's just different for him. It's different for him. I was trying to figure out something pithy to say crystal balls, right? Crystal balls, like my prediction. And I said Juckeye balls are on Womack. And man, it's like, it's one of those live moments in a show where I'm like, this is why I don't do this much, man. This is why I don't do this much. K. Smitty says, here's the thing. They're reporting the UM punishments are going to be soft. Feels like that's a harbinger for these other teams, meaning they feel like they can beat these new rule changes and the NCAA has no teeth or heart. Nobody's scared of them anymore. Smitty, I agree. But keep in mind, the NCAA, not the one policing these new rules. It's the CSC. And the CSC has new powers that the NCAA does not have. Subpoena power to go investigate things. And they're only working on this, which means fast turnaround. If at the end of the year, when they review these salary caps, right, somebody's off, like you're getting investigated right now and it's moving at the speed of light. There is no 2 and 3 year investigation. We're talking a month. Show us what you got. You're audited now. Here we go. We see some, discrepancies here. We're moving on to the next step. In addition to that, the punishments are harsh. So I don't think we can really say with any confidence one way or the other how that's going to work, but it's set up in a way, if it's legal, right? If it passes that muster, that it looks like a really good system. We just don't know if it's going to all get blown up or not. Many very confidently think it will. You heard Ross Bjork, who very confidently thinks that it will not. He thinks it will hold up because he says many people are missing that a judge has already reviewed this, a federal judge, and said this is legal. And he makes a great point. So we shall find out, my man. We shall find out. Megamax says there's no point in them trying to follow the rules when none of the other big schools are. Now they just look stupid. Now, Megamax, I disagree that none of the other big schools are. I think there are a couple of schools that we can see are going rogue. And to me, it looks like there's a lot of schools following these rules. It looks like Georgia is. It looks like Bama is. It looks like, we're looking at like Bama. They've only got like 10 recruits right now. It certainly doesn't look like they're going off the rails. And honestly, it doesn't look like Texas is yet either. We'll see at the end of the class. Or Oregon, we don't see Oregon spending a bunch. Matter of fact, the Oregon, I just talked to my buddy Max Torres from Scoop Duck yesterday, and he said, like Oregon, everybody's talking, they think we're poor now. They think we're poor. Like that's the impression a lot of them are getting from the Oregon football fan base, that they're furious. They're not spending a lot of money. And I think there's a lot more that are trying to adjust and follow this as if it's going to stick and going to hold than there are guys going rogue. But Megamac makes a second point, as well as our guy Rod. Rod says, LJ getting too much benefit of the doubt. He's a legend for sure, but recruiting has tampered down the last 2 to 3 years. And the everything's perfect crowd would take that and get very mad at Rod for saying that and say to him, you're crazy. It's not tampered down. It's, not better than 95% of the entire country. And Rod is looking at this the way I look at this, and they're looking at this as in, Ohio State versus the rest of college football. Rod is looking at this as in Ohio State versus the top 5 in college football, which is basically now become the Ohio State standard and where Ohio State lives and where they want to live. The standard Ryan Day has set. And if you're looking at it like that, I've already given you the numbers. Ohio State in the last 3 classes, defensive line versus the rest of the top 5. And they are, 5th place in 2 of those years. So yes, that is falling behind compared to the rest of the top 5. In addition to that, one of the poorest recruited positions on the team. So there's no denying that. There's some people who will come back and say, we literally just won a national championship. And the answer to that is yes, with the best recruited defensive line class we've ever had, which kind of proves the point. Best recruited defensive line class ever as seniors won a national championship. Some will say we spend money to retain our players. Absolutely. However, we spent that money last year to retain those excellent players from the best recruited class we've ever had, 2021, 7 5-stars. Those players aren't coming up through the system in the quantity that they were before. So now you're not going to need as much to retain them. Now you spend some more down here at the bottom to bring them in. However, this was all the philosophy before these new rules. Now, things just got flipped on its head. So they're trying to figure out what the best way is to do things. But one thing is clear. Offensive linemen and defensive linemen, particularly the biggest guys, are the most rare and the most expensive. And there are always going to be a team out there, no matter who you're going up against. It could be any guy. There's going to be a team that is desperate, and there's going to be that one team making that stupid offer that's going to throw everything off, which means it's never been more important to have an ace recruiter who can overcome that. Now, Brian Hartline's an outlier. Not everybody can be Brian Hartline. But Matt Guerreri's getting it done. Other guys are getting it done. So at some point, something's got to give here. He's right. And I'll tell you what, guys, if we come out of this class with 5 defensive linemen and 3 of them are 3 stars, holy crap, man. Whether you like the players or not, like what he's saying here and what Mac is saying here, I'm just being realistic with what the reality of LJ has been the last few years. I'm holding him to the same standard Day has for all his other position coaches if Day won't. Like, that is going to be just, so get ready. Get ready. Oh, and one of you said that my wife, I put her on blast saying that she got the Guinea girl mustache that she's got to get waxed. Look, the thing is, Dan said I'm sleeping on the couch. She has never watched a single episode of this show. Can you believe that? It really hurts my feelings. In fact, I've tried to show her clips, right? Like, let's say for when Josh Pate put that clip, like a 2-minute clip on his show. And I tried to show her, babe, look at this. I'm so excited, right? You're never going to believe this. It's the biggest show in college football. He doesn't put anybody else on this show. Look at this. Here I am. And I'm showing her this clip. And as I'm showing her this clip, with all my excitement, I'm showing it to her and I'm looking at her eyes and she's looking at it with a big smile. And after about 10 seconds, she looks down, she looks to the left, she looks at her dogs, she looks back. And I'm just like, man, not 2 minutes. You can't watch this for 2 minutes. So whatever, man. That's what it is. All right, guys. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon. Soon will be this evening at 5 p.m. for Jaquaden Guilford. We'll watch his film. You guys are going to love it. This is a dude now. This is a real deal dude. And I will see you then. Juggin' Bucks out.